Israel has launched what it calls extensive ground operations in Gaza, stepping up a campaign in which days of airstrikes hit hundreds of targets. The Israeli Defense Forces say that ground troops are now operating in northern and southern parts of Gaza. Israel says it aims to eliminate Hamas and free the remaining hostages. But there's growing international concern over the scale of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Palestinian health officials say more than 100 people were killed in overnight attacks.
Surveying the scraps of their destroyed lives and piling up evidence of the latest deaths. This tent encampment in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza was just one of several sites hit by Israeli airstrikes over the weekend.
My father died, my mother died, and my niece lost her eye.
Since Israel stepped up its attacks on Friday, explosions have filled Gaza's sky with clouds of smoke and its hospitals with bodies, rushed using any available vehicle. Medical workers said many of the recent victims were women and children.
What is the fault of these children, of these women? Isn't this forbidden? Isn't it unjust? Does no one see us? Are we sheep being slaughtered?
Thousands of people have again been displaced by the recent upsurge in bombings. Many also face impending starvation. Since early March, Israel has blocked the entry of humanitarian supplies, saying Hamas was stealing the aid. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the situation in Gaza is beyond inhumane.
The policy of siege and starvation makes a mockery of international law. The blockade against humanitarian aid must end immediately. And I say again, nothing justifies the atrocious October 7 terror attacks by Hamas, but nothing justifies the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
In Israel, thousands protested against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, calling on him to strike a peace deal to release the remaining hostages taken by Hamas in its 2023 terrorist attack.
After the 7th of October, probably most of us wanted to start a war against the Gazan as people. But after a while, we understand that this government is not representing us anymore. It represents only the extremists.
589 days of hell since the October 7th massacre. And instead of bringing them all home by agreeing to the deal that is on the table, Netanyahu is dragging us into a needless political war that will lead to the death of the hostages and soldiers.
The Israeli military is carrying out its offensive, codenamed Gideon's Chariots, which aims to seize more territory and take full control of aid distribution. Israel says it won't stop until Hamas ceases all operations and releases all remaining hostages.
Ahmed Bayram is a communications advisor at the Norwegian Refugee Council. I asked about reports from Gazan medics that women and children are among those killed.
Well, I can tell you that thousands and thousands of children have been killed needlessly in this conflict. Civilians are going in all directions. They don't know if the place they're going to is going to be safe. But don't forget, Israel has basically asked Palestinians to move into only 30% of the total area of the Gaza Strip, which means that for every 7 meters, there are only 3 meters that are, in which you can head or move. This is a tiny space, and if you look at the directive orders that the relocation directives that Israel is issuing, it's leaving people with no choice but to be crammed into little pockets that they don't know if these pockets are going to be safe or not, or if they're going to be providing water, food, or anything that is basic life essential. What is happening needs to stop. I think we have said that so many times. I have said it. We have spoken so many times. Every single time I find myself repeating the same line, which is, we need a ceasefire now to bring the hostages back and to end this suffering.
Yeah, it's the same thing over and over every time we've spoken, but only getting worse. 2 million civilians caught in a war zone, displaced over and over with nowhere to go and no more food and water getting in. That's also something that's changed for months now. What sort of desperation are you encountering on a daily basis?
I was speaking to my colleague the other day. She's in Gaza City, and she was talking to me about how a bag of infested flour now sells for $20. That's 1 kilogram, or a small bottle of cooking oil now sells for $30. This is, not food that is necessarily safe or consumable, but this is what people have at the moment. And she told me that if you consume one meal a day, you're among the luckiest of the luckiest. I can go on about prices that are beyond anything that we could imagine in this world, really, in this age. One loaf of bread now costs more than $1 in Gaza, which means if you have 3 or 4 kids, that's probably $10 just for bread every single day, which you don't have even. And of course, the lack of fuel situation is particularly appalling. Particularly that a lot of the fuel that Gaza has, which is very little, but the majority of it is actually in areas that are under relocation orders. So even these little storages of food are running out now, and there's no alternative. The entire siege, the little food that we have, the little water, is all going to run out if the aid gates don't open, if the crossings don't open, and if aid doesn't flow in.
Well, a key factor of the demand and supply economics of the problematics here is this blockade. Why can't anyone convince the Israelis to lift it?
It's because the key is in probably a handful of capitals around the world. We know Washington has probably the biggest influence, and Washington now backs the idea of an alternative aid system, which is going to place even more risk at, than we currently have with the targeting of humanitarians and the closure of crossings. The idea that is being floated and being supported and advocated for by Israel and America will actually, of course, mean that more displacement would be waiting for people. But until then, obviously, all we have now is siege that is entering a 3rd month. And obviously that has suffocated an entire population. I think the key is we still hope that diplomacy will work to end this suffering, will work to convince Israel to open the crossings. There's tons and tons of food, tons of fuel, tons of medicine. Mm-hmm. Imagine waiting a couple of miles away while people are on the brink of starvation.
But Ahmed, just explain why so much criticism of this new aid distribution group, this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is backed by the US and supposedly by Israel as well.
There are a few issues with it. First, again, the idea is being floated, nothing confirmed. But if what we are reading is right, it means that people will only be able to receive aid in probably 3 or 4, probably 4 hubs that are placed either in central or in southern Gaza, which means that people living in northern Gaza will have to move down south in order to get any aid, really. There's a few other issues around the risk of civilians moving around, being exposed to all risks. How is it going to work with the logistics? It will be coercive. It will link aid to military aims, and that's only a few concerns that we have. But the bottom line here really is that it defies international law, and it defies the principles of neutrality, of independence. And this is what we have been, calling for all this time. It's the independence of aid, not to be politicized. It has been politicized in Gaza, and now the danger is that it's being militarized as well.
Okay. Ahmed Bayram from the Norwegian Refugee Council, thank you very much for your input today.